Welcome, everyone. Feel free to find a seat if you haven't. And no, I was not entirely kidding about having 20 minutes of information to share. Either we will have time for naps or we will have time to network and talk and interact, share ideas. As I share the information that I have and tell some stories, trust me, you're going to think of some stories too. And I think we can always learn from each other. And it's one of the things that I've enjoyed about this group. I think I've been at this meeting every year, is the openness for people to share their own experiences. And I always learn by sitting and listening to other people that do the same thing I do. So we're going to dive right in. I have enjoyed gathering the information that I have over 7 years of running 3 different rent-to-own companies, and particularly in the last few weeks as I have been preparing for this. Enjoyed it tremendously. But what I have to share is, it is nothing profound, it's nothing new, but I find that we need to be reminded, we need to be sharpened. I do. And I hope that we can get a few great ideas from this and a few good reminders and maybe sharpen up a bit what we do in our daily operations. So, managing rental returns. That's the information that that's the topic that I was given. And I said, well, as I started thinking about it, where do you go with this? This subject is absolutely huge. Is it how to avoid them? Which Ed says we need to make sure we have enough, so we don't want to avoid them too much. Is it how to deal with the customer when we're in a situation where we need to get a building back? Is it relating to managing stock buildings on lots somewhere when, particularly in a situation like me where I run independent rent-to-own companies, I'm not connected in any way with a particular builder, so there are 25 different lots that may have my buildings on them at any time. Is it about that? Is it about managing that? Well, it can be all of those things. And we're going to cover all of those things and some things I've learned and gathered. Just very briefly, we'll kind of go down through there. One of the things, as you navigate this whole world of, it's kind of the necessary evil in our minds of doing rent-to-own, barn rentals, is the customers that don't pay, and we need to pick up a building. One of the things that this whole conference, I think, has done a good job of is helping us to understand the importance of having guidelines and the way we do things and practices. And to me, it comes back to a quote I think we had when I was 8 years old in our house. And I don't remember. I was trying to remember the quote exactly, but the basic idea is a quality decision avoids the need for future decisions. If we don't have certain things in place and we have decisions made ahead of time, and then in the midst of crisis, we're trying to quickly make decisions because, I didn't think about this, and what are we going to do, and we didn't communicate, and so the driver doesn't know what I want done in this situation. You usually don't make very good quality decisions if you're making them in the midst of crisis. So that's something I'm going to keep coming back to is, okay, where can we make a quality decision as we try to manage this entire arena of the rental returns so that we have processes in place that work, that everyone involved knows what they are, and so that we're not making decisions in the midst of crisis. So the first area that I'm going to speak about a little bit is relating to the customer. Again, I speak from personal experience. I only speak from the perspective of someone who runs a few rent-to-own companies, completely independent of any drivers, of any builders, and of any resellers or dealers with lots. So I just do this part of it. But what's the quality decision? What are quality decisions that I make, that I can make in my relating to my customers? And the most important one in my company is absolutely clearly defined. This is how we will treat people. Again, we're in the people business. This is how we will treat people. And for us, it is we will treat customers with dignity. I want them to be able to end a contract, no matter what happened, no matter how it ended, and I want them to be able to end that with dignity. One of the ways that I do that early on is I want to become someone that they look forward to talking to. Even though they're calling me every month, at least I hope it's every month, to give me money. If I can do anything to make them look forward to talking to me, I'll do it. And I joke with my customers often. Little things. One of the things that I do is I take a lot of notes under their account. Any conversation I have, particularly anything that I know is meaningful to them. If there's something going on with family or something with sickness, we always make a note of that. And then I'll try to look at that and just ask them the next time that I talk to them about that. It creates a personal connection. They feel like, hey, this guy isn't just a voice at Visa or MasterCard where I call to make my payment. And it's one of the advantages that the smaller companies have. Because in my case, when someone calls my office, probably 90% of the time they get one voice. And it's not me anymore. I still do a lot. But that's not, it's someone else. But they talk to the same person. And they like that because it feels like there's a bit of a personal connection. So before I'm ever at the stage of having to deal with a return and be the big bad bill collector, I'm somebody that actually talks to them and spends a little bit of time on the phone and asks them about something that they mentioned last month or 2 months ago. It is my goal, and it was interesting as I talked to different people in the last few weeks and asked questions. This same this same idea of how we treat our customers, that we go above and beyond and we excel and we're friends and we're treat them with dignity, whatever it was called, almost without fail, that was one of the first two things that the barn rent-to-own owners told me they would say is the most important thing in this entire thing, including the pickups, including rental returns, is that we will treat our customers with dignity and respect. And sometimes, I had a situation where there was somebody that started, he was many states away, and we were talking, and it was just, the third time I had talked to him perhaps, and so I'm asking him, I think I started by asking him what the weather was in that area and how much I liked it in his state when I had visited and all this. And before the conversation was over, he was telling me about ministry that he and his family were doing and what they were trying to do. And I said, can I just pray for you and pray that God would just bless what you're trying to do? So I did that. He said, oh, absolutely. So I prayed with him. Unfortunately, he stole my shed from me then a few months later, but this is one of those, it's like, I'm not quite sure how that worked, but I prayed a blessing on him and he stole my shed. It happens, So when we get to the point where for some reason someone is past due on their rental payments, there are a couple things that I tell my guys we have to remember. One of them is I'm not the only guy that they owe money to. If they're past due on their rent to me, they're probably past due on a handful of other payments. And in conflict, if I call somebody up and we're dealing with a customer that is past due, and there's this resistance or lashing out or starting to get really upset, the other thing I remind myself and tell my guys is, you're just the most convenient target right now. Just remember that. Perfect example. I was on the phone with someone who was past due and had broken a few commitments, called him up, and as I was trying to clearly communicate what my requirements were, I said, I want to let you keep this building. These are the requirements. Oh, well, I'll make a payment. I said, just so that you understand that. And he just exploded. Just horrible language. And I just let him go for a little bit. One of the things that I absolutely will not do is just hang up the phone on someone. But in this case, I just told him, I said, sir, that's not how we deal with conflict. We don't talk like that. Your language is offensive to me. And so if you keep talking like that, I'm going to quietly hang up the phone, and then when you've calmed down, you're free to call me back. Or you can stop. You can calm down right now, and we'll keep talking. He chose the latter option. We dealt as men with each other and didn't, like I said, he calmed right down. Well, then he started sharing more. He said, I am so upset. I've been working for months. I am so fed up with the immigration system. I've been working for months to get my wife legal residence in this country. And he was just, it wasn't me. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about the fact that there was this bill that, it wasn't something that I had said wrong. I was just the most convenient target for his months-long frustration to just boil over. Well, just remember that. It's almost always the case. There's this whole buildup of stress in their life. And someone that has 10 bills past due, there's going to be stress. So that's one of the things that I tell my guys is, just remember, you're not the target, ultimately, and deal with them like that. And again, don't hang up. Treat them with respect. One of the ways that I treat them with respect and dignity, and just recently I again reminded my fellows to use this, is put the responsibility back to them and say, if someone is just demanding something insane, I'll say, well, sir, ma'am, what do you think a fair solution would be? And by doing that, I've put the responsibility back to them, and I've given them some dignity. This guy actually wants to know what I think and what I think would be fair. And you very seldom have I found that someone still is just completely unreasonable, making completely crazy demands, if I've done that. So, sir, what we're trying to do is reach a solution to this disagreement or this problem. What do you think the fair solution would be? One of the other things that don't do, I've told my guys, do not do this, is use the word lie or liar that to a customer, because of there is something that I have found is it just creates tremendous pushback. They can have lied very obviously 5 times in the previous 30 seconds, and most of the time, the vast majority of the time, I'm not going to say, you just lied. I will find other creative ways to tell them that. Well, sir, you have made these commitments. You haven't kept them. You just said this and this. Can you explain the discrepancy? But just to come out and say, you just lied to me 5 times, to me, I'm trying to avoid confrontation and avoid the pushback. I have something to prove then. I tell my drivers the same thing. I said, don't show up and be a cowboy, and I'm going to show these people. And all it does is create pushback for absolutely no good reason. When I took over, the first that I entered into this whole thing, I took over a company that someone else had been running. And so, obviously, I'm getting familiar with all these ongoing accounts. And I remember when I was reading down through the notes on a particularly bad account, I was like, whoa, this is just pages of notes. So I'm here reading what my brother had written, because he was previously managing, and it was just all these commitments and what she said. And then in big, bold letters, this lady has a truth deficiency. Do not believe what she says. So there are creative ways to say that she is a perpetual liar. And one of the things that we have to be careful with, I have had to take the notes to court. I'm pretty careful what I write in the notes. I might write a little German or Spanish occasionally, and hope that a judge doesn't know those languages. But I tell my guys, just be aware that whatever you write may someday be read by a judge, because we've been called to court to testify. So anyway, just be careful about that. And it's another way that we show respect and dignity, even if the customer never is going to see it. It's something about the attitude of my heart. If I just rant about someone, it'll come out probably in my relating to them. So that was the customer side of it. What about navigating just the fact that we have these late accounts? How do we deal with late accounts? There are, I find, two very distinct and different thoughts on the whole thing and how to navigate that. One of them is pretty rigid and has set goals on, we want our percentages of late accounts to be under this percent. And one of the things that I saw recently was a marker board in the office and a daily percentage. This is this was yesterday's percentage of late accounts. Here's today. This is where we want to be. Here's the difference. It was a good visual. You glance at that and okay, this is where we are. This is where we want to be. So one of the ways that a few of the ways that those are achieved is a lot more calling your customers, perhaps daily. When an account is past due, I'm going to call that person every day, and I'm going to leave messages, or I'm going to, if I get a commitment, then I'll stop actually calling, and we'll put that commitment in. I'll put a note on my calendar on that day. I'm going to call that person. Just, hey, I know you had a commitment for today. I'm sure you didn't want to let your account get so far past due that we're going to have to pick this up. So I'm just calling to get that payment from you. Instead of, hey, it's 4 o'clock, you haven't made your payment. You told me I would. I think we all know this, but it's good for us to be reminded, because I tell you, when you deal with this day in and day out, sometimes I get a bit cynical and I start not believing anything anyone says. I'm like, I can't say liars. But nobody's, I can't believe anyone, and I get fed up. So we have to be careful with that. So, calling people daily. One of the things that we heard Ed talk about is texting, robocalls. I'm not giving any kind of legal advice there. That's his department. But it's things that people use on a regular basis. And as I've talked to people with varying success, one of the other ways that you can do that, if your goal is low past due percentages, obviously you're going to pick up the late accounts pretty quickly. The other thing that I find done, if that is the goal, is having all of your due dates on the same day of the month, whatever, first of the month. Then at the end of the month, the day before that day, you have a really good number. Give it 2 days and it looks awful because you're now a day past everyone's due date, and if they haven't paid ahead, even if they're within the grace period, it looks terrible. The other way of thinking that I found is much less rigid. Yes, there are processes in place. Yes, we have red lines, and no, you can't cross that. But the thinking there, and I'm just throwing this out, I'm not saying one is good and the other one is bad, but the thinking there is, okay, so I can go pick up this building. Now, I'm not the builder, I'm not the hauler, so I'm gonna pay a hauler to go get it. I'm going to bring it back to a lot where I know for a fact that until it sells or is re-rented, it will generate absolutely nothing for me. Whereas, if I work with this customer a little bit longer, I can maybe get at least something. Even if it's for a few months here, it's less than a full payment a month, I'm getting something. So again, it's a slightly different way of handling it. Not that one is right and the other is wrong. In that case, if someone is paying less attention to percentage on the last day, percentages of past due accounts on the last day of the month, I find that they probably will let their due dates be any day of the month. And then, if John Doe customer has a $100 monthly payment, but his due date is on the 15th, and he only can pay $70 this month, I'm not going to go in. His due date will go from 15th to the 5th of the next month instead of all the way to the 15th. He did make a full payment. I'm not going to go in and change his due date to the 15th to keep him there. I'm just going to let it. Okay, you chose to rent it for 3 weeks instead of a month, and that's fine. The other thing that they will do is typically, instead of saying, if a payment is more than so many days late, we will add a $20 late fee. They will say, if a payment is more than 10 days late, we will deduct a $20 late fee from your payment. So John Doe customer is 20 days late. His normal payment is $100. He sends $100. Well, he's now late. It's actually $120. I'm going to take the $100, but I'm going to deduct the $20 off the top. Only $80 is going toward rent. His due date's only going to advance 3.2 weeks. So be it. He's going to get billed a little bit sooner than in 1 month from now. At no point during the month are you going to have as impressive a percentage, because there's not a time right before everybody's due when you can get the percentage and it looks really good. Again, 2 different ways of handling it. Just ideas to consider. I employ the latter. I would not even consider going back to having all of my due dates on 1 or 2 or whatever specific dates of the month again. I did that for a number of years, and like I said, I wouldn't go back ever unless I was legally required to. But I've talked to some people that are very successful doing that, and there's a lot that I have learned in the last month talking to some of them. So I told Leland when I was down to see him, I said, we could always learn something from everyone. I said, sometimes we learn what we don't want to do, and sometimes we learn what we do want to do, but we still always learn something. So there's something to be learned from both ways of looking at those past due accounts. So moving on to the relationship with haulers, navigating all of that. Because, again, in my situation, I own no truck, I own no trailer, I own no mule, I have no hauler as an employee, nothing. I have no authority over any of them. So a quality decision that we need to make, And I know this is something that Ed just was shocked a few years ago when we told him that basically none of us had written agreements with the haulers that we used. That is something that I think is increasingly important, is that we have a clear understanding of responsibilities before a crisis. We have a clear understanding of how we do things when we send a driver to get a building and they get there and it's full of stuff. What do? Do they pick it up with everything in it? Do they try to unload it? There's a covered porch. Do they put it on the porch? Do your drivers actually know exactly what you want done in those situations? What about they show up, the customer comes out on the porch, and they want to pay? Say, I want to pay. Do they know how much they have to pay in order to have the driver leave and let the building there? That's something that we started doing, is when we send a pickup request, it says if you get there and the customer wants to keep the building, this is the amount they pay, either in cash to you or they call and pay by card to us. So we've made the decision ahead of time. There's not somebody angry on the porch and we're trying to figure out what can we do to appease them. This is the number. And like I said before, by all means, I tell my drivers, is that seriously, a building is worth so little versus a life. Because I've had drivers, thankfully, that I've not employed, but other drivers who, young fellows with their big, cool trucks, bragging about how often they've had a gun pulled on them when they're picking up a building. I'm sorry, I am not remotely impressed. I think you're stupid. I wouldn't tell you that probably to your face, but it's a stupid way to do business. There's no need. It's a life versus a building. I don't know of anyone that's actually ever gotten shot doing a barn pickup, but with that attitude, it might happen. So unloading contents, like I mentioned before, if they get there and there's, what about if it's locked? Somebody was just telling me a story of they sent a driver to get a building and there were no windows and the door was locked. So at the same time the driver was going out, they sent a text message to the customer. Hey, by the way, we've given you plenty of warnings. We've talked to you. We're getting the building today. Boom, customer calls the office. There's a, $20,000 Harley in there. You better not touch that building. Well, there were no windows. It was locked. So, account manager immediately called the driver. Oh, no, it's on the truck already. We're on our way. Oops. Thankfully, that all worked, but it's the kind of stuff that we need to think about, and we need to have clear understandings with our drivers on what do they want done. What about, the other thing is, make sure that in your contract it's very clear to the customer, and I would suggest, I'm not giving any legal advice, I would suggest that you talk to Ed about this, exactly how you word it. But whose contents are they? If they've gotten warning, they've gotten notification as much as you're able that you're coming to get it and they don't empty it, make sure that that is clearly spelled out in your contract. I think you've all had the same experience that I have. The longer you ignore a building from someone that's not paying, the more chance there is that something's going wrong. Either when a driver finally gets there, the building is gone, someone else has moved in and, as we call it, has taken it hostage. Particularly a landlord, if someone got evicted, they owe me $2,000. I am going to keep their shed until they pay me. One of the ways that we make a quality decision about that is a landowner consent, where the landowner must sign saying, yes, I understand, this isn't mine, I have no rights to it, but you may put this here. One of the other suggestions that I received was just make sure that if you have an idea of the number of pickups approximately that you do per month, year, don't send your drivers one pickup request one month and then 35 the next. And then, why aren't you picking these all up? We have to be reasonable with them. it's one of the frustrations with me is because I don't have any employees that are drivers. I can't call up and say, you've got to get this thing today. I have good relationships with the builders and the driver's bosses typically, and so if there's an emergency, I can usually call someone and something happens quickly. But it's one of the reasons that I think this was actually mentioned last year. I had told Leland, but it's one of the reasons that some of us in our position say that we want our drivers to be the pallbearers at our funeral. That way they can let us down one last time. Because it is a bit of a point of frustration at times when this thing has been here for X amount of weeks. We've got to get this building picked up. But so the sooner you do them, obviously, the less chance of there being a significant problem. What about, and this is something that I would really like to hear from you as well. What about when a driver shows up and a building is gone? What processes do you have in place? How do you navigate that whole thing? How do you figure out what to do? A few suggestions, things that either I or other people have done is obviously there are a number of online tools where you pay a subscription and you can search and you can at least find other addresses, family members, perhaps send a driver to a few other addresses and try to find someone or knock on a door. Private investigators. Some of the people here I know have done that, where they have someone else do that, try to find a person, and typically if they find the person, they can find the building. References, that's a quality decision. Do that ahead of time so that you have a few other numbers. Andy, can you tell the story that you told me last night? Actually, I'm going to give you... Do you mind? He was telling me about references, and basically not all references are of the same quality. And he just had a story that I thought illustrated it very well.
The situation we had, the customer's mail started coming back with no forwarding address. And so finally we sent the pickup guy out, and he got out there and the building was gone and the house was empty. There was no one living there. So later in the week I went down myself to see if I could talk to the neighbors, but there was really nobody around. But I saw in the yard there was a for sale sign, a private for sale sign with a phone number on. So I called that number, and it ended up being my customer's mother-in-law. And so I just, asked her, does she know, where this building is? I said, this is kind of my last thing before I file a police report, for a stolen building. And she said, well, just, she might know where this customer's at. She'll check into it. Well, I got into my vehicle to go home. Before I got home, my customer called me and wondered what he has to do to, so I won't file a stolen report. And he made a pretty good payment right there, and later in the week paid the building off completely. So as a matter of practice, even though I got that number off the for sale sign, as a matter of practice, we do try to get parents or in-laws or grandparents, as opposed to siblings, contact information when they fill out the contract. That information tends to be more stable. They're not moving around like younger people or siblings, and you usually get a little better response. That's just been my experience.
Yeah, particularly I thought it was interesting that it was what you said, either the mother-in-law or ex-mother-in-law. That's like the ultimate contact number, is the ex-mother-in-law, from what I gathered. No problem squealing on them. The other thing is, you get their buddy. Chances are they're kind of going to cover for, it's probably not going to get you very far. Whereas if it's a parent that has any kind of concern for their child, they're going to be parent or in-law, grandparent. There's going to be a bit more concern that my son or grandson doesn't get in trouble with the law. So you better call these people up or you're going to hear from me. One of the other things that he just mentioned was a police report. Good luck. my personal experience, we've done it a few times, and I have not found that law enforcement. Now, I've found law enforcement to be very helpful at times to go out as an escort or a peace officer to go out and say, I'm concerned about this situation for the safety of my driver. Okay, if I can make contact with this customer and I can make contact with the driver, then I'll go and sit in the driveway until he's done with his work. I found them to be surprisingly helpful in that way, particularly if I call, hey, I'm the owner of this little company, or the manager, and I'm not I don't want to press charges. I'm not even trying to get past due rent. I just want my building, and I want my driver that I've hired to go out. I want him to be safe. So I come across not as vindictive and I'm going to get this guy for all I want. And I found law enforcement to be very helpful. But as far as actually filing a report and getting anywhere, maybe some of you have, I'm seeing no, but maybe somebody has had better success than I, but I've never gotten very far. So if you've gone through that and you have a building and you're taking it back to a lot, one of the things that I also deal with is dealing with the relationship with the people that are re-renting or selling my used buildings for me. And the quality decision in this case is, what is the goal? Obviously, we want to move it, but how do we do it? Are we going to very aggressively price this thing to get it out there? Two things that I think are probably, in my experience, are the two most important, I don't know what you'd call them, but the two most important issues that I'm going to look at is, I want the building, and some of them are damaged. How bad is the damage? Send me pictures. I want to see. I want to get the full potential value out of this building. So how am I going to do that? Is it going to be worth replacing a piece of metal on the roof or a piece of siding? So I want the full potential value from this building, and I also want it to appeal to the widest possible customer base, which is why I probably won't approve a rental for some three-sided thing that goes up against another building. And, well, if I get that back, how many people is it going to appeal to? 2 people a year that go across this lot? I don't know. So that's something that we always consider is, okay, what can we do and how can we make it appeal to the widest possible range of customers, the widest base of customers. And then, one more thing, try to, for the sake of the people that are renting or selling your buildings, try to come back to, because when I order a pickup, there's a list of information including the resale price that I want on it. It goes with the driver and it goes with that building. But come back and reevaluate that pretty regularly. And if it's not moving, obviously we're going to revisit that and adjust as we need to. Try to get it out as quickly as we can and actually generate income from a good customer again. As we've gone through this and just looked at some of the practical things that we face, I'm sure you've thought of stories or you've thought of ideas, things that you do that you feel have worked well. I would absolutely love to hear a few of those. Because it's being recorded, I'm sorry, but I'm going to give you the mic. But I would love to, if questions, things that we can talk about that would help each other. If you don't have any, we're going to dismiss. If you do, I think we would all benefit from hearing from our experiences. Yeah, I've done that many a time. Find a customer on Facebook. Yeah. One of mine, many states away, that stole a building from me I soon figured out that from his Facebook that it seemed he had the money that he saved from not paying me anymore when he stole my building, he had used to pay off a travel trailer he was happily bragging about he had finally gotten to pay off. So it's interesting. Got a little information there. I use it pretty frequently and surprisingly effectively. If you have a question, go for it.
I'm just wondering, how do you use that? I mean, you have to be careful with texting people and calling them. You know, if you have, we don't do the computerized dialing, but if you find somebody on Facebook, what are your parameters?
Any information that they post that's public, I use so that I know who I'm dealing with. If I send a driver out and this person that's clearly whose picture is on their Facebook comes to the door and says, no, they don't know this person, that kind of information, exactly where they live, there may be information that they post there. And obviously, it's only what they make public, so it's often very limited. But it still has given me a springboard numerous times to further investigate something. The other thing is, I often go into their friend list and look at other people with the same last name or people who comment a lot or on their Facebook, and then I'll do some people searches and see if there are any other addresses that come up with what appears to be family members. They may, employer. Just recently I used mine like that. Or I did that with someone who I was just about to file a police report just because she wouldn't let us onto the property. And I found out where she worked, and that helped me to navigate that whole thing, and she's paying.
One of my other sons that works for May was trying to find a stolen building and got on their Facebook page, and of all things, there was the guy's picture with our barn in the background. He made it nice.
Yeah. Craigslist, that's a place to check if you have a building stolen. I know a number of people that have found them by searching what's being sold on Craigslist. Do we call their place of employment? We can. One of the ways that I used it in the most recent case is this was someone that had some pretty interesting stories about their life and what had happened and all the people that had died, and I was afraid she was falling into the truth deficiency category. So this was just one simple way that I confirmed some information that she told me. It's like, okay, this was actually true. She told me who she worked for. Well, I went to her Facebook and confirmed that indeed that was true. I also had the employer's phone number then. And I'm not giving any legal counsel, but I don't know of any problem with calling there at a reasonable hour and asking to speak to this person.
The only thing I would say with that is that you can't tell the work that you're calling about money that's owed.
Oh, absolutely
you can call
not.
and ask that you're looking for somebody, do they work there, etc., but you can't call and say, hey, so-and-so owes me money, or they stole my building, any of that type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will never do that in a voicemail either. If I call a late customer and I'm not absolutely certain from the voicemail greeting that I know whose phone this is, there will be absolutely no information other than, this is Matthew from ABC Rental, please give me a call. Very careful with that for liability. Good point.
Did you ever turn anybody over to a collection agency if they didn't pay, or did you ever try that route?
I have not. Speaking from personal experience, have we ever used a collection agency? There probably are people in here who have. Is there any insight that you would share?
Guys use one before, sometimes sell, sometimes not. There's some attorneys that have that service to collect, but
So some people have used it.
Amy would have more insight on that one, probably.
Yeah, we found a private. I'm not sure how it was done, but how the connection was made. But we found a private investigator years ago in North Carolina that absolutely loved what he did. Years before he had found out that the town bully owed the bank for his, was it a VW Bug? Yeah, a VW Beetle. It's behind his payments. And there was nobody in town that was about to go try to repo from this guy. Well, he found out, what, $100? $100 to go jump in that car? Absolutely. So he had a friend who was an EMT. So he got this all arranged, and he ran past the guy's house with sirens blaring on an ambulance down to the end of the street and stopped. Distracted the subject while Leroy jumped in his car and took off. It was just a little distraction tactic there, and off he went to the bank and collected his $100, and he was absolutely hooked. He loves what he does. For the first, goodness, it was a few years, we sent him a number of buildings. He had a 100% success rate at finding these. Now, more recently, he did some, but after a while, there were some really tough cases, and he didn't do as well. But we had the best success with that private investigator finding people and thus finding a building better than we had any other method 5 years ago. So that's something valuable, and they typically are part of a network. I work in many different states, so I'll tell Leroy, can you find somebody in Wisconsin or wherever that does what you do?
Do you, when in the case of repos, do you have your dealers buy them back, or would you let them resell for a commission? And do you have any formulas for repricing them?
Interesting. That varies a bit from dealer agreement to dealer agreement. Anybody hear the question, how do we do that with repricing? And does the builder dealer buy them back at a significant discount and then they resell them at whatever they can get? Or do we own inventory on their lots? In most cases, we own it. If we can find dealers that are willing to buy it back, give a significant discount, you may come up with an agreement that works for everyone. But does anybody have insight on that question?
We have one dealer who buys them back, and the others they just sell them for a commission. Our line for repricing them, we put 10% off unless the building is basically new or a lot of damage.
So the baseline is 10 and varies from there, I guess.
We do it a number of ways, but for the ones that we hold the inventory on, when it comes back, we give an automatic 5%, and then 5% per year. So if the building's a year old, it'd be 10, and so on and so forth. Once it goes over 15%, then it's as is what we would do. Now, we have one guy that when we buy his contracts, we pay him a 2.5% spiff, so we do 102.5% of the cash price, but then as soon as he picks it up, he pays off the contract, or the EPO, basically, the remaining cash price. So it just basically, for us, has worked out what the manufacturer wants to make it work for them.
Yeah, I've heard of the same thing where there's maybe a different arrangement where they pay a little bit more up front, and then the agreement is you pay me whatever the payoff of that is minus late fees and past due rent, just what the cash payoff would be as soon as it comes back. Anyone else? Anything related to pickups and...
I just, one thing that we really like to stress to our drivers, and I'm currently a driver myself, is if you go to a place, the building is missing, do everything you can to find any information about, from the neighbors. Go to any neighbor you can, get anything you can from them regarding do they know when the building was hauled away, did they get phone numbers or anything do they have a name on the record or the vehicle that hauled the building away. Any information like that, it can be tremendously helpful. And if it's obvious where the building was, get pictures of the site where the building was with a camera. We like to have a camera that has a date stamp, that puts a date stamp in the picture. If that case ends up in court, that could be very useful. And for myself personally, when I've been picking up, there have been several times when I have just pursued it and ended up recovering the building that same day. And there was this one time when I went to a place. Building was gone. The people that had been renting the building from us were no longer living there. But they knew, they didn't know the guy that was renting a shed from us, but they knew the landowner, and they had his phone number. So I got the landowner's phone number, talked to the landowner. He knew kind of the area that the person had moved to, but didn't know exactly. We had like a street address, and this was in Alabama. In some places in Alabama, the streets are not very clearly marked, and the numbers are not, you kind of have to kind of wing it to find an address, even if you have it. But I spent several hours on this in the same day and ended up finding the building. And it just, despite several dead ends where, I would get this address. I think it's over there. I heard he went over to this area and put the address in my GPS, went to there, and there's nothing there, not even a house there. But there are people there, and I just kept asking from people, do you know anything about this? Do you know anything about this street? Anything about this person? And I just kept doing that, just kept getting anything I could from anyone who was willing to talk. And ended up finding the building that same day. And as we were there, I was getting pictures of the building, and the guy pulled up. Anyway, I didn't end up, it was dark when I was there, so I didn't end up picking that building up that same day, but we did recover it. Some weeks after that, we went back and picked up the building. The point is, be like a bloodhound. Follow the trail until it goes cold and try to heat it up again. Do not give up. Just keep looking. Pry up under rocks. Do not give up. And it many times results in something, either recovery, or you may find a person and they sold the building and you end up getting money from them. But it has led to success of some type in many instances for us. So we find it really helpful.
That's one of the issues that we deal with other drivers. If there's not a clear agreement of, all right, you're going to be compensated. If you spend 3 hours looking for us, you're not going to do this on your own. We'll take care of you. A few things like that go a long way to motivate a driver to keep going versus, oh, well, I'm going to go deliver 3 new buildings to people and I'm going to make them happy instead of wasting my day doing this.
That's what I was going to ask. I was just wondering if there'd be some input on how people are paying pickup drivers and then how you're incentivizing them to do this type of thing. Because I've not found that they're very willing. I mean, if they're getting $75 for a pickup, it doesn't seem like they usually want to do anything other than roll up, oh, no building, and keep driving. So I don't know, is there any input on what's kind of the going rate?
Anyone? One of the things that I did recently when I had what I knew was very difficult and probably time-consuming pickups, I called up a driver directly and I said, hey, if you get this, and we have a written agreement of how much they get to do pickups and deliveries for me, but I said, I'll give you an extra $150 if you get this thing before this date. Have it back on the lot. Money speaks. So.
Yeah, people are usually pretty fair. You give truck drivers are probably usually pretty fair. If you give them nothing, they're going to give you nothing.
Yeah, great sense of justice.
Another thing, this is maybe getting away from sheds, but I can't get away from the... Did I hear Ed Wynn say this morning that people are rent-owning guns? I've been trying to get a picture of going and doing a repo on a gun.
We were talking about exactly the same thing at lunch. She said, I guess you take more and bigger ones when you go do it. I don't know. Trust me, I don't want any part of it. That's just... Yeah. One of the things that I thought of, you said about pictures. What driver doesn't have a phone with a camera? If it were up to me, every driver at every pickup, first thing they would do is get out, take pictures from a few sides. If they can, take pictures of the contents, if they're going to move it with contents, and then do it. You have the date stamp. It's not what you're saying actually on the photo, but the digital, there's a date on the date and time when this was taken. That has been very helpful. A few times that has been done. Ed mentioned today about a $125,000 lawsuit. I actually know about that. Thankfully, it at this point hasn't actually gone anywhere. It wasn't me, but somebody I'm familiar with. I do know of one where contents, expensive tools that simply never existed in this building. You won't believe how valuable some of this stuff becomes. I mean, sentimental value. But there was a situation where somebody settled for tens of thousands of dollars just to stay out of court because of all these tools that supposedly were in the building, where if somebody would have just taken a few pictures, probably would have settled the whole thing. So I had a situation last week, 2 weeks ago, in another state where someone was claiming that we picked up a building, took it to a lot. I know the guy, it was the driver was the owner of the shop that built the building, because his driver didn't want to go back to this neighborhood. It was such a rough neighborhood. He was uncomfortable, so the owner himself went, picked up the building, took it to a lot, made sure it was locked up. It was locked. He didn't even have a key. The owner didn't have a key, but he took the hinges off, looked, got a good idea of what was in there, put it back on, let it there. Customer calls us, says there was $30,000 worth of some kind of musical instrument equipment, amps or something. His brothers that were in there. It absolutely wasn't true. And he said it was unlocked, open for anybody to look at it. He was the only person with a key. When they got there later, yes, it was unlocked, but he had unlocked it clearly. So a little bit of photo evidence, it could save you tens of thousands of dollars. If I was in charge of drivers, they would photograph every building before it's moved.
Not only the building and the contents, make sure you're taking a picture of their yard. I don't know how many companies in here may have had to wipe out a building because they've supposedly destroyed the yard, the septic tank, or anything else. So if your drivers can take a picture of the yard before they enter, after they enter, that's the best case scenario as far as going into the courts.
Yeah. I remember when number of years ago, a road where we had a furniture store, the road there was going to be widened to 4-lane. Before anything was done, I looked out the store window and there was someone just walking along with a video camera, back and forth from the construction company. They were getting video of absolutely everything along that road, everyone's property exactly as it was before they touched anything, and then it got filed away, and if there was a claim of damage or you did this to my drive or whatever, they had the evidence. I just think it's incredibly valuable. And
we've had a couple situations where customers were living in the buildings. How do you relate to that type of a situation?
That brings up something I wanted to, something that just happened to me recently. We just had that, and we called at the suggestion of the driver.
When you close, mention it was half an hour. I'm not going to be here in half an hour.
Okay. When we close, as soon as we're done, if I end on time with my 20-minute speech, thank you for participating. There'll be a half-hour break. At the suggestion of a driver who had been there now for the third time and never found anyone, but fresh cans opened and gas line into this building and lean-to here and lean-to there and a stove and pipes. Clearly someone was living in it, and it was going to be more than just cutting a wire because of the gas lines and all that. He went out a few times, left a note for us, which is something that we have them do, leave a note right where the person, if they come home, they're going to find it. He said, call the code enforcement office. Because they're living in it, and clearly it's a violation of code to do that. So I called up the code enforcement office. They sent someone out, and they said, let me be clear, I do not have the authority to get your building for you, but I can fine them for a code violation. If they do what is required to come into compliance, I can't touch it. Well, we have the building. 2 weeks later or something, we had our building after working on it for months. So that was something that we just recently did that I had never even thought of doing before. But it was, it was a clear violation on a number of different things. So rather than fight it, they just said, okay, get the building. Anyone else have ideas specifically on what you've done when someone's living in it?
You mentioned a while ago about a $20,000 motorcycle being in the building. Well, suppose there actually was one in there. You picked up the building, took it home, and the motorcycle fell over and there were some damage. What happens then?
There's this guy I know named Ed Wynn. He's sitting right there, the big smile on his face. I would refer you to him on that. I am not going to comment because I'm not giving legal advice. But some of that, at least, and in some states at least, would be covered under what you have in your contract, if I understand correctly. We have pretty clear language about what happens to contents if we have done XXX and you have done one of these, and we recover our building contents. So, but talk to Ed. Do you have something to comment about that?
Well, I have all my agreement with that.
The dealer's not liable for contents when we repossess, and insofar as I know, that holds water. I would, as a practical matter, if I could get in the shed and roll the motorcycle out, I would before I took it home. But if I couldn't and it fell over, that's not your tough luck. That's the Harley rider's tough luck. Should be. And insofar as I know, your agreement controls that. So you want that language in your agreement.
What about who owns that? Do we have the ability to say, if we have done X, Y, Z, and you have not emptied it, they are considered abandoned goods and we will dispose of them?
I have that in my rental agreements also, that we give you, I forget what I say, it varies, 15 days, a month maybe, you come get your stuff, otherwise we deem it abandoned and we won't take responsibility for it. Some dealers say, we're not going to take responsibility for it, but we're going to charge you storage fees while we're keeping your crap. So reasonable minds vary, but I'm not... A motorcycle is a titled vehicle. So I don't know if you can just grab it. You'd have to go through a process with the law to foreclose that guy's interest on a motorcycle and get it deeded over to you. That would be tough. You have to give him his motorcycle back finally. But if it falls over and gets dinged, you're not going to have to pay for that.
Yeah, and you have to remember this is the angelic group, so we probably wouldn't be trying to steal some, or not steal. Yeah, we don't ride hard.
What if the door is locked? Can you break the lock open there on the property?
Sure. It's my building.
It's your shed, yes. So you can roll the motorcycle out?
Yeah. 9mm will blow a lock up. Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Another question.
Does anyone have buildings on Indian reservations? What do you do?
Indian reservation. What do you do, Indian reservation?
Well, it depends on the reservation. They're all different. And we usually end up getting a lawyer to be able to pick up a building.
Indian reservations are laws unto themselves. Before you start delivering sheds to Indian reservations, go talk to the chief.
I was going to mention, if there is a way for you
and make friends,
to have the chief on your side, where he understands you're trying to provide a service to his people, you're not a greedy, money-hungry. If he looks at you that way, you are way, way ahead when his nephew has a building that's not being paid.
Tribal council or the chief, you go make a friend first, and then they'll give you your shed back.
Before you're the big bad bill collector, be their friend. It's a different way of getting to of doing the same thing that I'm doing by taking an interest and joking with my customers.
Well, we had a woman who had dogs. We've had it happen a couple of times. Who had animals in their shed and wasn't paying the rent, and we couldn't pick it up because we couldn't take the animals. We didn't think we should take the animals with it, and they were penned inside, and yet she still didn't pay, and we left notes and things. We couldn't just let the animals loose. It just seems like there's a certain point, like if we take that Harley as the example, we move it outside because we don't want it anyway and everything, and then somebody steals it, are we liable because we put it out? And then what about these dogs? If they were dogs I wanted, I'd have said bring it back, and I'd have taken them, but,
Interesting. 2 different points there. That's why I tell my drivers, if you bring a building back to me with contents, even if the contents are damaged, I know that I have been in control of those contents at all times. They are inside my building and thus covered by my contract. If you set them out and then they claim that John Doe neighbor took my $20,000 motorcycle, then what? Suddenly it seems to me that, wasn't it you? Oh. Suddenly it seems to me that we're in a little bit of a different legal situation. The other one was animals. We have brought buildings back with animals in them. Tell the dealer to put it on the lot and go buy a little chicken feed. Feed the chickens. That same night, the customer was there to get their chickens. Be very careful doing it, but we've done it. Okay, our time is up. Thank you ever so much. I learned a lot. I hope you all did too. Thank you.